And that's a wrap on the 2025-26 season, as my name is Dante DeCarry and he's Drew Posty, as we do a wrap-up on the 2025-26 season as well as the postseason, as the Regina Pats fell in 5 games this past weekend to the Medicine Hat Tigers after finishing 7th in the Eastern Conference standings. And Drew, it was a very productive year for the Regina Pats as they made it to the playoffs for the first time since the 2023 postseason when they lost in 7 games to the Saskatoon Blades. Now, coming into this playoff series against the Medicine Hat Tigers, the Regina Pats had just 6 players on the roster with at least 1 game of playoff experience. And of course, the only player that had played in that 2023 postseason left on the roster was Pats defenseman Colton Bridgman. So how much of a valuable experience was it for this team, not only to get back in the playoffs, but to get that playoff experience?
Oh, this was huge. This was the goal of the team this year, was to make the postseason, and that's exactly what they did. And I think to play the Medicine Hat Tigers the way they did was also a huge bonus. Let's be honest here, a lot of people had written the Pats off in 4 games straight, but 3 of the 5 games they scored the first goal. Yep. They won in a very difficult rink, taking game 2 in Medicine Hat, and had multiple 2 and 3 goal leads. So this was a team that came out and showed that they can compete with the best in the league, the defending league champions, and a very good Medicine Hat team that wants to win a back-to-back championship this year. Just an invaluable experience for a ton of players, and for a franchise that's looking to take a significant step next year. Mission accomplished this year. You always want to go as far as you can, but this was the main goal, and they accomplished that.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself. We saw Maddox Schultz and Liam Pugh play, games 3 and 4 for the Regina Pats, but we also saw some players really step up their game in the playoffs. Zach Lancer was able to score 3 times and add an assist. Ruslan Karimov led Regina with 5 points in 5 games in the series as well.
Yeah, Ruslan Karimov was, in my opinion, the best Pats player, the best forward anyway. Zach Lancer not far behind, though. He's really making a name for himself in the NHL draft. Those are 2 big names that you hope to see back in the Pats lineup next year, because they could be key contributors on a nightly basis, and I really think both of those guys could push 60, 70 points, or maybe even more, depending on who they're playing with. It was really good to see them have breakout playoff games here.
We also saw a breakout season from Keats Fawcett, who had 30 goals, led the Regina Pats with 30 goals, and was second behind Caden Brown in scoring. Brown led the Regina Pats with 61 points this season, and he is one of the 2 overagers moving on. That includes captain Efren McNutt. And what type of a void, do you think that will be for the Regina Pats? Obviously, there are lots of players that could step it up, but maybe just to comment on the 2 20-year-olds graduating.
Yeah, well, those were 2 of the guys that did have significant playoff experience with the Prince George Cougars before they came to the Regina Pats. And Efren McNutt was great. I mean, you think about him as a defensive defenseman, but he comes in and puts up around 50 points. We saw him go end-to-end a couple of times per night. That experience in the playoffs that he brought is going to be missed, but I know that he passed it down. And Caden Brown was an offensive juggernaut for a lot of the season this year. I mean, he had a 6-point night against the Saskatoon Blades in February that really kickstarted a huge month for the Pats in that push to the postseason. So you're obviously going to miss that playoff experience that those guys brought, but you know that they are leaders, and they were able to pass that down to some of the guys that will take the reins as leaders moving forward here.
We also saw Mathis Paul really kind of step up his game in the second half of the season. Matt Peranich is another player that will return to the team next year. You look at a guy like Jace Eglin, who was able to contribute with a career-high 11 goals, and we know what he can do on the penalty kill. But as far as goaltending is concerned, both goaltenders are eligible to return next year. Of course, the Pats have 506 players that will be 20-year-olds. You can only have 3 of them, so they'll have to make some decisions there. But you look at what Marek Schlenker did. He finished 4th in the WHL in goaltending appearances with 48. He was the team's player of the year. We also saw rookie goaltender Taylor Tabashnik take some steps at the end of the season.
Absolutely, and we all think back to what Taylor Tabashnik did against the Prince Albert Raiders near the end of the regular season. I think the official number was 54 saves, but it was actually over 60, I believe, when you look back at some of the shots that maybe didn't get counted. So that was a historic performance, and we did see a lot of consistency out of him. And Marek Schlenker kind of took over the reins as the starting goaltender and played a ton of hockey, which is not an easy thing to do for a goaltender, and was really reliable for most of the season. Had a little bit of ups and downs, but for the most part was really reliable and was named player of the year for a reason, because there was a lot of nights earlier in the year where he faced a ton of shots and always gave the Pats a chance to win.
All right, Drew, as we wrap up this, season wrap-up video, let's talk about the offseason for the Regina Pats. Now, of course, they will have a fairly high pick in this year's CHL import draft. We know, obviously, Ruslan Karimov will be a very important, import player next year. They're going to look to potentially add to that at the CHL import draft later on in the offseason. But I guess the next thing on the docket for the Regina Pats is the WHL prospects draft, which is now not including the U.S. priority draft. Both of those drafts have now been combined together with the rule change, and the Regina Pats have the 9th overall pick and an opportunity to really build on this, young nucleus of players that are coming up.
Yeah, it's obviously going to be tough to top last year, getting Maddox Schultz and then that huge trade to get Liam Pugh 3rd overall. But I think anytime you have a pick in the top 10, you do potentially have a player that can step into the lineup fairly soon as a 16-year-old. It's a bit more of a wide open draft this year than maybe it was last year, but there is some good talent out there, and a top 10 pick definitely gives you a good chance to have a player that can jump into the lineup as a 16-year-old.
And let's not forget all of the second and third round picks that the Regina Pats have, whether they use them as draft capital for trades, whether to move up in the draft, or maybe they use those picks to continue to add to the prospect pool. All right, thank you so much for coming out to the Brand Center over the course of the 2025-26 season. Also, a big thanks to joining us, both myself and Drew Posty, over the course of the season, both on Victory Plus and on 620 CKRM. That's the season wrap, and we will talk to you next year.